I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right, guys, happy Monday. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is a retired professional wrestler, and he's the former governor of Minnesota. Everyone, please give a huge welcome to Jesse Ventura. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Sabrina. Great to be on. Wonderful to be here. And, we were talking before the show. I had to explain to you that I'm really computer illiterate. I've never owned a cell phone, and I don't do computer on a general basis. So I credit my son for connecting me with you. And it makes it good because that requires father and son having to do things together then. Which I like at this point in my life.
That's awesome. I know I have to tell you that you and Ralph Nader have been the most requested guests from my audience to come on.
Well, thank you. Ralph's an old friend. I remember when Ralph made his run for president a number of years ago, and I went to when he would come to Minnesota, I would go and attend, and I have great respect for Ralph Nader and consider him a friend today. He's also he's fun to be around because here you have a guy who is so committed. He lives in New York City. He doesn't own a car. And yet he did and spearheaded the biggest safety measures for cars throughout the United States of America. And he himself has nothing to do with the car. He rides the subway.
That's right. That's right.
And so, no, you respect someone like Ralph like that. And speaking of cars, then I was telling you that I'm computer illiterate, but I've still switched over to Teslas. I'm driving Teslas now. I wanted to eliminate my carbon footprint. I did my entire house here in solar, and I overbuilt it so that now my cars and my house are completely powered by the sun, as is my second house down in Mexico. So I completely live under the sun's power now. And I'm really proud of that. I invested into it, and it's only a personal thing. It's like I know it, and I walk around knowing that. And you know what, Sabrina, it makes me feel good.
That's amazing. I know. I wish I could do that. I was just like, wow, it's just so. What does it feel like right now? Like not having to pay for gas?
Well, no, I have to pay for gas. I'm just speaking electric.
Gotcha.
My electricity is free. No, I'm still on the gas yet, technically. And in Minnesota, of course, you have to have that for winter. Or you'll freeze to death here. But no, I'm still on that. But I've weaned myself completely electrically, and I think it's a great thing. And I was dedicated to my Porsches. I mean, those were my cars. I'm a car kind of guy, and I gave them up, and I thought that I'd have heartache over doing it. And I don't, because every time I drive by the gas station now, because Porsches take premium. Yep. So that means you're going to be paying 75 cents to $1 more a gallon than what it says on the sign. And now I don't have to do that. And the other thing is, have you driven a Tesla?
I haven't.
Oh, if you talk about performance, there is no comparison. The fossil fuel engine cannot compete with the electric engine any way, shape, or form. Do you know? Sabrina, do you know how fast my Tesla will go from 0 to 60?
How fast?
1.99 seconds.
What?
When you get in them, they're like getting into a space capsule rocket ship on the road.
Oh, wow.
Well, get this, they make no sound. There's no engine sound. There's no, fluids. The only fluid on my Tesla that I will have to change are the wiper fluid. You don't change oil. You don't use your brakes. I can drive here to my golf club and come home and never touch the brakes.
Oh, gosh.
Do you know why?
I don't.
Because you drive it, it's like a golf cart. When you come off the accelerator, the car slows down and will stop. If you take your foot off the accelerator, you will come to a stop and your brake lights will be on in the back.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're decreasing speed. What they did, they've brought the modern era. I talked to the kids over there and they said they tried to create the easiest driving car on the planet, and I believe they've succeeded. Not only that, the fastest.
Wow. I'll have to go by there one day and test drive.
Put it this way, Sabrina, then we'll go on and I'll let you talk to me because this is your show. But put it this way. If I jump on, I need the adrenaline rush every now and then. As a person, I got 34 parachute jumps, and in my life, I've always required a little bit of adrenaline occasionally. Well, with a Tesla, you can get it just going down the down ramp. Because it's so fast, it's like a ride at the fair. And I'll tell you, if you jump on it, here's what you got to do. Make sure your head is firmly against the seat on your head. Because if you jump on the Tesla and you're not, this thing's so fast it can give you whiplash.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
wow.
It's a spaceship on land. And, and the reason I chose Tesla, here's why I did it. I thought, okay, it's an electric car now. Okay, Tesla, they're flying things to Mars and getting them back. Mercedes and all these other car companies, they can't do that yet. So if anyone can build an electric car, it's going to be someone who can fly things to Mars and get them back. I thought that was a good rubber stamp of approval. And so that's why I went with Tesla.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have to check it out. I'll definitely have to. You convinced me to check it out now.
Well, and then he's got a sense of humor because the car is quiet. I'm like a salesman. Because the car is quiet, they felt you needed sound effects if you wanted it. So on my cars, one of the sound effects, do you remember Monty Python and the cloppity clop of the horse? Yes. Well, you can drive your Tesla and that's what it'll sound like when it goes by.
Oh my gosh.
See, he's got a sense of humor. He throws in this humorous stuff that are hilarious. There's other stuff too, but I haven't even found it all yet. This thing is like, I'll probably own the car 4 years and still not know everything that's in that computer in it. I don't know. But all I know is I can drive it and it goes fast and it does what I want it to do right now, and I don't have to go to gas stations.
That's awesome.
Anyway, Sabrina, your show, get going. I'm doing this like it's my show.
So I have to tell you, like when I was growing up, like wrestling, it was huge. All of us, like me and my friends, we used to always watch like pro wrestling.
May I ask how old you are? Just so I didn't. Well, give me an idea of what era in wrestling you're talking about.
So I'm a millennial.
What is it? Oh, that confuses me right there. I don't pay attention. I guess I'm a baby boomer. That's what they tell me.
Yeah. Like
yeah.
My parents
okay.
Are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a boomer then. So you're millennials in the middle, like my son.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're cool now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we used to watch you guys like all the time, like Jake the Snake,
Sure.
Undertaker. Like it was huge, really huge back then.
yeah.
I've always been curious. What was it like for you being a professional wrestler? Like, what was that like? Were you able to still go about your everyday life, or were you
Oh, no.
bombarded the way a lot of celebrities are?
Oh no, the world of pro wrestling was and is and probably still is. I can't speak to it because I've been out of it for actually it's now 30 years, believe it or not. But oh no, it's a world where you have to be dedicated, you have to be focused. And when you came up like I did, there were over 20 some regional territories throughout the country that all had regionalized TV. And you would move to that particular area and you'd wrestle there for a while until you started to lose your draw. Then you could move to another part of the country where you were still brand new because they hadn't seen you on TV or nothing. They might have read about you in magazines and all that, but they hadn't seen you yet. Then what occurred, and I lived through all this and was part of it. Then what occurred in the mid 1980s, which is the part you're talking about, was when cable TV came in, where all of a sudden a station could be seen all over the country like that, not network, but cable, which was way cheaper than network television. And so Vince McMahon, he inherited the Northeast Territory, WWF at the time, from his father, bought out his father. He was not loyal to these other 25 promoters. They all had unwritten rules that nobody crossed over each other's boundaries, right? This is the old day. It's like Al Capone and the mafia, and it's all, if I can put it in that type of description, they all had their territories throughout the country, right? And Vince then in the mid 80s threw that to the wind. With the advent of cable TV, he went out and handpicked the greatest talent in each territory, brought it under one roof, and went across the nation. That's where you've seen Hulk Hogan, Jesse the Body Ventura, Jake the Snake Roberts, Andre the Giant, Tito Santana, Superfly Jimmy Snuka. He went and got all us, and we were ready for it because wrestling was going through a huge change then. And it had the opportunity, and it blew up to what it is today, and it had the opportunity to even do more. I mean, I tried to unionize wrestling way back then and was, of course, slapped down for it. You know, anytime you try to unionize something, and that occurred because I was in Las Vegas at the height. Wrestling was going crazy. We're on NBC now, Saturday night's main event, all this stuff. And I got in an elevator with the great Gene Upshaw, who's the all-pro Hall of Fame guard of the Oakland Raiders, right? And Big Gene got in the elevator, and we looked at each other, and I'll never forget, Big Gene looked at me and raised that big finger of his, and he says, "You boys need to unionize." Because he was head of the NFL Players Association, the National Football League Union. And I said, "I know, Gene, I know we do." And then the story, at WrestleMania 2, right before it, I stood up in the dressing room. There was no executives there. And I said, "Boys, now's the time to unionize." I said, if we threaten to walk out, they've already did the publicity. If we threaten to walk out, the federal law requires they can come in and we can unionize if we stick together here. Well, when I was finished making my speech, it all went by the wayside. I got home a day later and Vince McMahon calls me. "What's this about you trying to form a union?" Reads me this and that. Well, I ended up having to I quit the WWF, but I was in a fortunate situation. I had to anyway because he wasn't going to let me do it. I had already gotten the role in Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so I quit the WWF and went off to Mexico for 10 weeks and filmed Predator with Arnold. And then while I was filming with Arnold, he wanted me to join him and do his next film that fall, The Running Man. So I got that negotiated out of the way, put it back in my back pocket. And then at this point, when McMahon wanted me back, well, I now had what we term as FU money. if you know what that is. I'll let you use your imagination on it because I don't like to use words like that generally. But I now had FU money waiting in the wings. I'm getting ready to do the Running Man. I just did the Predator, and he needs me back because NBC wants me for Saturday night's main event. I'm the voice. And so I then went back and negotiated with him, and then learned later it was Hulk Hogan who ratted me out to Vince.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, that happened a number of years later when I went to federal court against Vince. I had to, he had to do a federal deposition, and I told my attorney the story. And I said, if you can work it around, find out who it was that told him that I talked of unionizing. And so in a deposition, they can ask anything. And so my attorney was brilliant. We won the case against Vince, but that's here down the road. But and he asked Vince, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince said no. My attorney said, has there anyone that ever tried to form one? And Vince thought a moment, said, yeah, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once, way back. And my attorney said, well, did you hear Mr. Ventura do this? And he said, oh, no. He said, then how do you know he did it? And with no hesitation, Vince McMahon said, oh, Hulk Hogan told me. And he was my friend. And in the days that I came up in wrestling, that's the worst thing you could be. There was a term called an office stooge. And that's a guy who pretends to be with the boys, but all the time is stooging back to the promoters. That's what you lived under in those days of wrestling. And they still live under it today because there's no union today in wrestling at all. I tried to do it 30 years ago. And then the reason I didn't continue, when I went to do Predator, I became a member of the Screen Actors Guild. I had to do Predator. So from that day forward, I today have retirement from the Screen Actors Guild. For years, I had health insurance through the Screen Actors Guild, all of that, while the pro wrestlers got nothing. And when I came back to Vince, I said, Vince, I'm not going to say nothing anymore. He says, oh, really? Why? I said, well, because if these guys are too stupid and don't want to fight for it, I got mine. I said, I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild now. I got health insurance. I got retirement. Everything's great. If they don't want it, that's up to them. So I let it lie, and I never did nothing more.
So what do people do? Like, I know Hulk Hogan later on had a reality show. The Rock got into acting.
Oh, Rock's huge today. Rock is, he's through the roof.
He's up there.
He's way up there.
I wonder, like, the other wrestlers that retired, like, what do they do if they're not getting anything else?
There's a lot of them that I saw it when I got into wrestling. That's one of the reasons I brought up a union. There's no retirement. I use it when Vince called me and fought with me over this. I said, Vince, we're not getting this just to fight you. I said, right now, and this was way back in the 80s, I said, right now I'm paying over $5,000 a year for health insurance for my family. I said, if we had a union, there's strength in numbers. That drives the prices down. I said, right now, I see all these old pro wrestlers. I see them all the time. They spent 25 years in the wrestling business. They don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of now. If there was a union, maybe they'd get $500 a month in retirement or something of that order. The NFL has it, baseball has it, everybody else has it. And here's the deal. I never could figure out, we're on television wrestling. Why didn't AFTRA, the American Federation of Television People, why didn't they require wrestlers to join their union when we're on TV? And that's and I figured out why. You want to know why they never insisted upon it, Sabrina?
Why?
Money, of course. They would have then got all these wrestlers on their health insurance plan. Do you want a group of 100 and some wrestlers coming onto your health insurance plan? We get beat up in that ring. And if for people that say, oh, it's fake and this and that, here's a statistic to look at. The death rate among pro wrestlers dying prematurely is way younger than the National Football League.
Wow.
So you tell me, Sabrina, there was a time in my career, and I don't hold any record by any stretch of the imagination. There was a time in my career I wrestled 63 consecutive nights in a row.
Wow.
And that included driving there and home. Not just getting in the ring. That included travel. 63 straight days I wrestled every night without a day off back when I was, I think, 26. I'd gotten out of the Navy, and I was about a year or two into my pro wrestling career in Portland, Oregon. I was just fortunate because most every night, you know who I was wrestling? I was wrestling the great Jimmy Snuka. And that's a night off in the world of wrestling. That's an insider. They know what I'm talking about when I say that's a night off.
Oh my gosh, this is interesting. That explains a lot now because, like I said before, like wrestlers don't have protective gear. I mean, football players at least have like pads.
You're naked pretty well. And you know the difference though today? I hate it today. I can't watch it today at all. You know why? It dawned on me, Sabrina, why? No, you know why I can't watch it today? There's no rules. No, there isn't. You can walk into the ring today, glom the guy with the chair right the first thing you do in the match, and you don't get disqualified. In my day, you had to have the artistic ability to cheat and hide it from the ref. You could, if in my day, if you threw, and here's how it cheapened it too. If you threw a guy out over the top rope in my day, that was an automatic disqualification because it was considered so dangerous. Today, they jump out over the top rope 5-8 times a match.
Yep.
See, it's what you're looking. Do you know what happened? And I'll tell you this. We like to laugh at Mexico. But what you see in the United States today is the takeover of lucha libre. What went on for decades south of the border in Mexico is the wrestling you see today in in the US of A. Mexico won.
Wow.
There were two styles in my day. Two styles. There was the US style and there was a Mexican style. What you're seeing in the US today is what was the lucha libre Mexican style, where everybody's like a Marvel comic superhero.
Wow. Wow. That is interesting.
You're getting the Jesse the Body firsthand insight into a sport that I am the greatest announcer of all time. No one will ever surpass me. You see, Sabrina, that you're bringing out the old Jesse.
Yep. So I'm curious.
Sure.
A lot of us, myself and audience members, we were most of us were former like Bernie Sanders supporters.
Yep.
And we've become, very disappointed with him, the two-party system altogether, the squad. And so we're just like, we're done with the two-party system. And one person I always point to is the fact that when we bring up third parties, a lot of people who still want to do the duopoly, they're like, well, third parties can't win. And I always mention, I'm like, well, let's talk about on the local level and not just the national level. And I say, well, Jesse Ventura won. There's third party. Green Party has put people into these offices as well on the local level, but they don't really talk about that.
And Sabrina, I'm not so local. I was one of 50. That's a governor. That goes higher when you're winning a state. That puts you as a player in the big game too. You're on the fringe. You're on the fringe and let's remember, people forget there were 2 independent governors when I was governor. The other one just doesn't get the publicity I got. And he's still there. He's a U.S. Senator today. And his name is Angus King from Maine. Angus King and I were both independent governors. Fun story, Sabrina. they have the National Governors Convention, right? Where all the governors go to Washington and you get your day with the president and they have meetings. And on one day, all the Republican governors meet in this building in Washington and all the Democratic governors meet in that building in Washington. Well, the governors people didn't provide anywhere for Angus and me. Mm-hmm. What happens to the two independent guys? So you know what we did? We walked down Constitution Avenue and sat on the park bench, and we held the Independent Governors Caucus. Me and Angus, right? Guess what happened? The entire Washington media followed us. We had a group of media around us. You'd have thought it was Ali and Frazier. and because the other guys were locked in rooms in a building, Angus and I were out on the street. And I made the point of saying it. I said, you notice they didn't provide anything for us independent governors to meet. Right. So we're meeting out here. So I would ask you, press, please go a half a block away when we're done talking to you so Angus and I can hopefully talk in private. And they did. You know, they were very nice to us. But that just shows you that, no, it can be done. And I'll tell you right now, Sabrina, 2024 is prime.
Yes, that's what I was saying. I was just telling people
2024 is prime. Oh, let me tell you why. Andrew Yang and the Forward Party is going forward. Now, this is a party made up of a lot of forward thinking, let's get things done, not necessarily on the fringe. Call us the dirty word that many of us are, is centrists. You know, us dirty centrists who sit in the middle, which is the majority of America. How do you think I won in Minnesota? I had the middle. The Dems had the left, the Repubs had the right, and Jesse had the middle and won. And so what's happening is this. You got a movement to bring the United States together again, which only an independent can do. I did it in Minnesota. My first year in office, I had a Democratic Senate and a Republican House. For 3 years, whoever I sided with generally prevailed until the fourth year. The fourth year, election year, they jumped in bed together to oppose me. See, so only a centrist can get the country back together again. Only a third party can get these two. See, they fear the third party more than they do themselves. So they will work together for fear of a third party entering the game. You following me?
I was going to ask you about Forward Party because
I'm in the Forward Party all the way, hook, line, and sinker. They're going to have a convention in 2024. They got money that they're getting legally and good. It ain't special interest money. And right now, a former colleague of mine, Republican governor from New Jersey, Christy Todd Whitman, is one of the co-chairs, along with Andrew Yang, a Democrat. See, we're coming together to say we're going to rebuild the United States of America to what it ought to be, where we're not running around screaming at each other because of the left and the right, you know, so polar opposed to each other. That ain't going to win nothing for us. That brings back the Civil War. You know, I'll tell you this, Sabrina, I can't forgive Republicans right now. And I'll tell you why. Because Republicans carried a Confederate flag through my Capitol and no one's apologized for it. I'm waiting for an apology from the Republicans, their party, their leadership, anyone. And I'm not going to get it from Donald Trump, whom I personally know. But that aside, that's why I'm angry with them. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When I take an oath, Sabrina, I also took an oath 47 years ago, and guess what? My wife and I just celebrated our 47th anniversary because I took an oath. So let me explain what oaths mean to Jesse Ventura. So I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I today view the Republican Party as a domestic enemy to our Constitution for what they did January 6th, when my capital was attacked physically. 5 people died in that attack. So I want to do something to heal this country, get us back to what we ought to be. And like me, Sabrina, you need to understand, Jesse Ventura is socially liberal, but Jesse Ventura is fiscally conservative.
Right.
I feel that government is far too large. It goes into many places that don't belong. But on the social issues right now, I think it's more important to keep. We used to have an old cliche in the Independence Party in Minnesota. You know what it was? Here's what it was. I don't want a Democrat in the boardroom, and I don't want a Republican in the bedroom.
I'm sorry. It's funny.
Because Democrats don't know how to do business, and Republicans want to interfere with your sex life, to be blunt.
Well, okay, so here's the thing.
All right.
We were talking about Forward Party recently, and I think, I'm not sure if Andrew Yang's aware of this. I would like to talk to him about this as well. But when he used the term centrist, for those of us, I think that we're further left or
Right.
Marxist or whatever, it's
Right.
a turn off, because we're just like, what is happening here? We already have centrists in the Democratic Party. So I think that's one of the concerns. And the other concern is, where does it stand on healthcare? Because I didn't see anything on the website about Medicare for all. And a lot of us are for Medicare for all.
So am I. But it ain't going to get done until we get control again. Till someone, see, I tell my son every day, Sabrina, that his father's a genius. And you're talking to a genius right now. You know why I'm a genius, Sabrina?
Why?
I have something that's very rare today. I have something called common sense. If you have common sense today, that makes you a genius. Because it's so rare.
But do you think?
No, and I'm saying, I'm for, hey, here's my belief, give you mine. In a country as rich as America, everyone, if they're sick, should be able to go to the doctor. End of story. I'm going through it right now. I lost my job at Russian television. And I'm on Social Security. Well, with my job at RT, I lost my health care. Do you know I'm on Xarelto, right? Blood thinners, because I've had clotting issues 3 times in my life. Okay. Do you know what's just happened to me, Sabrina? My Xarelto went from $25 a month. Last month it cost me $500. Because I lost my health insurance. Now I had to file for this COBRA stuff, which allows me to get my old insurance back till I can reinsure. And thank God they're hopefully going to pass this bill now that's going to allow the government to get prescription drugs at a reasonable price, so I don't have to pay $500 a month to keep myself alive on Xarelto. So I know what you're talking about. And you can be a centrist and know that. But you can also, don't be fearful of a centrist. We're common sense. We're in the middle. Hey, okay, you've had enough of centrists in the Democratic Party. Well, you ain't had enough of centrists in the Republican Party, have you? And guess what? You ain't going to win without them. People got to start realizing, in order to win and succeed and go forward in a democracy, requires compromise. Nobody gets all or none. There's going to be the other side. You fight them. And when you get the opportunity, you beat them. But there's going to be times they might beat you. And that's what keeps a democracy what it is. But for all one way or all one the other way, that's where us centrists sit. Wait a minute. I don't want it to be all socialism. I don't want the I think my belief is you have capitalism and you have socialism, and what you try to do is you find that common denominator of both to where you can get them to work together to uplift everyone. And when everyone gets uplifted, everyone succeeds more. And I've been a governor and I've been a mayor and I live in a capitalist society. So you've got two major confrontations between capitalism and socialism that we're trying to blend together. Now, are we going to let it go all socialist and the end of capitalism? Or are we going to go all capitalism, end of socialism? Well, we found out neither of those things work, do they? You had Russia, which was all socialism that self-destructed, right? And then you had us when the Wall Street crap took over, and you saw pure capitalism at its worst, and you saw self-destruct with that 20 years ago. You need a balance between the two, and that's where that nasty word, Sabrina, that you're so afraid of comes into play. Centrist.
Yeah, because when I hear centrist, I think Bill Clinton. And that's why I'm just like, I don't know. Because if you think about someone like Bernie Sanders, like a lot of the policies that he was running on were very popular.
Right. Right. Oh, I actually tell you this story. I actually went down when Bernie came to Minneapolis, me, Jesse Ventura, the ultimate independent. I've never voted for a Democrat or Republican, and I've never ran as one. I went down to meet Bernie thinking I might endorse him. Well, I got down there. I had called his people, and well, they couldn't quite get me in to see him immediately, so I had to sit around and wait a little bit. The 38th governor of Minnesota when you're running for president, you know. And then when I did get to see him, I got a brief moment with him in the hallway as he was moving from one thing to the next. I didn't even get into the room with him, but I was able to ask him what I needed to know. And here's what I asked him. I said, Senator, if you lose to Secretary Clinton in the Democratic primary, I said, will you support or will you run as a third party, or will you support a third party candidate if one comes along? And he looked me right in the eye and said, no, I will support Secretary Clinton. I looked at him and said, thank you. And I turned around and left and knew right there Bernie was not getting my endorsement, because Bernie Sanders, I learned at that moment, was a Democrat hiding in independent clothing. He was portraying himself and getting elected as an independent so he could try to draw in independents who didn't want to be part of the two gangs, while the real Bernie is a Democrat when it comes down to, because when he said he would give his full support to Hillary Clinton, I just looked at him and said, thank you, and turned around and left. And I never more sought to endorse him or to do it, because see, I'm for a third entity. I want three choices. And the only way today, in my opinion, to get three choices that I see on the horizon, legitimate right now in my lifetime, because I'm 71, Sabrina, is Andrew Yang. He, I look at as the biggest hopeful thing. If we don't, and Andrew's one of these guys who works with figures, right? He's one of these, computerized guys. He told me, he said, every indication right now, we're going to see a Trump-Biden rematch in 74. Now, 60% of the country don't like either one of them. Sabrina, throw Jesse Van. Did you know what I dabbled with the Green Party last big election, right?
Yep.
Okay. They were fractured. I saw that right away. I said, you mean I got to try to put a party together that's fractured down the middle and then take on the Dems and Repubs? Impossible. And so, but did you see what Fox News did? Fox News got wind of it. This is Fox News. And they threw my name into a poll with Biden, Trump, and Ventura. I polled 18%, and the Greens didn't want me. And in fact, you know what one of the quotes was from the Greens? You know what it was? Well, is he one of us?
So that's a question I did have for you as well, because a lot of people ask that question, like, why didn't Jesse run in 2020? So we're hearing from you now, because I saw that poll and I was like, well, if Jesse Ventura ran like 18%, like that's huge.
Yeah,
for
but the
candidate.
Sabrina, the Greens wouldn't endorse me. They gave it to I forget his name, Howie Hawkins. Howie Hawkins got there, and Howie wouldn't give his delegates to me. I said, here I am. And they were so fractured and divided, and they're like most third parties. They really don't want to win. They just want to make a statement. See, that's what I've run into in all my dealings with third party politics. They don't really want to win, because if you really want to win, you got to get in the mud. And you got to fight the fight. Now, that don't mean you got to sell your soul. I've never sold. You know, a few years back, I got to tell you this story, Sabrina. A few years back, I was going to run, and I could have. And people thought I was nuts when I said, I'll run, but I need Howard Stern as my running mate. And people said, what is he, crazy, Howard Stern? Let me explain the method to my madness. Howard Stern keeps me clean. Howard Stern, can you imagine how much money he could raise just saying on the radio, Jesse and I need $20 a piece? Howard Stern could raise $40 million overnight. That keeps me clean. $20 ain't going to get you in the office. You know, I don't have to take PAC money. I've never took PAC money. Also, here's the fun part about it. If you're going to be that type of presidential candidate, Sabrina, you need a VP who is despicable. That way, they're not going to kill you and put him in office. See, if I ran with Howard Stern, they're not going to kill Jesse Ventura and make Howard Stern president, are they?
That's a good point.
You know who told me that? When I was getting out of office, as Minnesota governor, I had a getting out of office party, and my good friend Charles Barkley came. And I was having fun. And this is before Barack Obama was even on the screen. This is 2003. And I said that night, I said, well, if I ever go for president, I said, I want Charles Barkley as my running mate. And they took the mic over to Charles in the Hilton Hotel, wherever it was. And Charles said, Governor, I think that's a brilliant idea, because Charles goes, you know, I'm fiscally conservative, and you know I like smaller government, and I don't like to pay, you know, all these taxes, you know, smaller government. He said, I'd make a great VP candidate. But he said, you know, the most reason? And I said, why, Charles? He said, well, if you took me, we could fire the Secret Service and save all that money. And I, like the dummy, stepped right into the joke. I said, how could we fire the Secret Service, Charles? And he goes, well, there ain't nobody out there going to kill you and put a black man like me in there. Now, remember, this is 2003, before Barack was even on the screen. And I sat, when Charles Barkley said that to me, I said, you know, he's right. And it stuck with me all these years. You got to have a VP guy who can't take the office. You want the opposite. That way you won't see, because I don't buy that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John Kennedy. I don't believe that. I will, no way. And here's a belief I have: if they can kill the president in broad daylight and get away with it, who can't they kill?
Well, I have to show you, Rokana was on here recently, and I mentioned to him, you know, that people Majority of Americans want a third party. And I think he was taken aback a little bit about this. But I want to show you this and I want to get your reaction because I don't think this sat too well with him. The majority, let me just go ahead and it's just a clip here. The majority of Americans want a third party. Neither Republicans or Democrats are actually helping the American people. Like we see them helping corporations all the time. I would actually say that 2024 would actually be the time that a third party candidate could actually stand a good shot.
Now, if there is an independent grassroots candidate who is standing for bold progressive policies, fine. But usually the independent third party candidates tend to be billionaires or celebrities. And it's not clear to me that those policies that they're going to advocate are going to be Medicare for all or free public college or the progressive policies that many people, your listeners, care about.
Well, I happen to know one here locally pretty well who was grassroots third party candidate, and that was Dr. Jill Stein. And when she ran, we were guilt tripped to vote for Hillary Clinton. But I still say to this day that Jill Stein was the better candidate.
Well, I supported Hillary Clinton in the general election, and I'm proud of supporting Hillary Clinton. I think that Trump was such a threat to democracy and is such a threat to democracy. Look, if Hillary Clinton had won, we would not have had Roe versus Wade overturned. So I do not agree with people who supported Jill Stein, especially in swing states, because the costing of Hillary Clinton that election really led to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court that we currently have.
Well, I would say that Hillary Clinton's campaign cost her the election herself. I feel like that was her doing. Ignoring the Rust Belt, I think, was a totally awful idea. You cannot avoid the Rust Belt. Having a running mate who was anti-choice, Tim Kaine was not pro-choice when it came to abortion, was also not a good idea. And she's corporate. So for me, I was looking for someone who's grassroots, someone who actually cares about the people, someone who is not going to get us into these never-ending wars. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama. And people wanted something different. So I don't blame someone like Jill Stein. I blame Barack Obama. I think he's the one that actually gave us Trump in the first place because he made all these promises and he didn't fulfill them. So that didn't go too well for O'Connor, but
well, you hit a great point there, Sabrina, and that is this. Notice how whenever the Democrats lose, they blame the third party. They do not blame their policies. They don't blame their candidates. It's always, oh, the third party interfered, siphoned off votes. And what they're telling you basically is the standard storyline, the pick the lesser of two evils.
Yep.
And well, as the late, great Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead said once, if you're made to pick the lesser of two evils, aren't you still picking evil?
Yep.
You know, I mean, and that was Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead, a musician. He saw it, you know, and this guy, he's the perfect Democrat. Blame the third party. Blame Jill Stein. If there wouldn't have been Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton would have won.
Yep.
You know, that's their standard ploy. And there's only a few times it hasn't worked. And one of them was Minnesota.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
I want to
the reason was because I won, so they couldn't blame me. They truly could blame me for losing. But the fact was I won as a third party.
Yeah. And they act like that was the first time a third party candidate ran in a presidential election. I mean, Cynthia McKinney ran the same year. Barack Obama won. I mean, it's Sabrina, not the first time.
Are you familiar what they did to us in the mid-90s? Okay, Ross Perot ran in 92 and got 19% of the vote, right? Then a war happened in the Reform Party, which I won't go into. We had former Colorado Governor Dick Lamb all set to be our presidential nominee the next year or the next presidential to show we were growing. But the Perot forces came in, cut his legs out, so we got Perot twice. But here's the important thing. It came to that election with Clinton versus Dole. And you got to hear this story. This is the truth. When that came to that, okay, Bob Dole didn't want Perot in the debates. Now here's Perot, who got 1 out of 5 votes. Doesn't that put him in the debates? He just got 1 out of 5 votes in the previous presidential election, 20%. So that comes to 96. Perot, Dole doesn't want him in the debates because he thinks it'll strip from his conservative base. Bill Clinton doesn't want him in debates because Bill Clinton doesn't want to debate at all. He's so far ahead. Debates can only bring him back. He's going to win. So Dole and Clinton cut a deal, the two parties, backed up by the Federal Debate Commission, because they're nothing but hand-picked former heads of the two parties that run it. So here's the agreement that happened. Normally there's 3 presidential debates. Because Clinton didn't want debates, they cut it to 2. That was his payoff for then agreeing to keep Perot out of the debates. So that year, there were only 2 presidential debates and 1 VP debate. Normally, there's 3 and 1. And get this, the 2 presidential debates, by design, were held on the same night as the World Series.
Of course.
Sure. Now, what should a good American watch? The debates. But what are we all going to watch? The World Series. Come on, let's live in the real world. So see what the manipulation that took place in the 96 election with a third party. Perot got 20% of the vote the previous election and was then denied by the 2 political parties of even debating in 96.
And that, I see that seems like that's when it started, because I haven't seen third party candidates debate since.
Well, I'll give you this one. When I won governor in Minnesota, of course, then the big election became Bush and Gore. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that I had won in 98. This was in 2000, and I had to travel to New York. And when I got to, I was traveling in Manhattan in the middle of the night with the window down, and we came to construction guys. And one of them looked over and saw me in the limo. And he raised his hand, pointed, and goes, "Hey," he goes, "the wrong governor's running," and pointed at me. And this was a guy in the middle of Manhattan in the middle of the night.
Wow.
But do you know why I couldn't run? I had a lot of people telling me to run in 2000. You know why I couldn't? I couldn't because I made a commitment to the state of Minnesota in 1998 that I wanted to be their governor. I do not seek another political office while I currently hold one, because I committed to do that job first. So therefore, I would not run for president in 2000 and then run off and do that. And after I said I wanted to be the Minnesota governor, I got to live with myself and look in the mirror. That's first and foremost. So that's why I didn't run in 2000. And like I said, I didn't run last time because the Greens, they wouldn't have me. They were fractured. And even though I polled 18% on Fox,
wow,
they chose that. And so I just moved on. And, I don't plan on running in 2024, but I'll say this, you never say never. No one predicts the future, If Andrew Yang and them come to me and they can present to me ballot access, I'll put it to you this way, Sabrina. You give me ballot access in all 50 states and let me go in the debates, I'll beat them both. I go by a simple premise, the Jesse the Body rule. If I can debate them, I can beat them.
Wow. It's interesting because I talked to Cynthia McKinney earlier this morning, and I asked her the same thing you just told me. I said, would you run, if you move back to the United States, would you consider running for president again? She said the same thing. Well, never say never. So I was like, okay.
There was talk of Cynthia and I running together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that talk has taken place a lot. I love Cynthia. Cynthia and I correspond. We talk to each other occasionally. And again, all you progressives, you don't need to fear someone like me, because on the big issues, I'm as progressive as you need. Now, let me argue something, though, on the school stuff and the higher education. I like to argue this one.
Uh-oh.
See, when I grew up, there was the draft, right? So all the rich kids got to run off to college, and they were immune from the draft. They got deferments. But kids like me that grew up in the inner city, I went to Minneapolis Roosevelt High School. Kids like me had to go to Vietnam and got drafted into the military because we couldn't afford to go to college, right? So when I went into the military, I thought, wow, I figured out a way to go to college. If I serve my 4 years in the military, when I get out, I get the GI Bill, and then they pay me to go to college.
Yep.
So I had to sacrifice part of my life in which to get a payback to go to college. I never even used it. I used it 1 year and then started pro wrestling. So I still got 3 years on my GI Bill sitting out there. But the point I'm getting to and the point I'm making is the rich kids got out of Vietnam, they got out of the service and got to go to college. And because they incur a bunch of debt, all of a sudden we're going to now have to get rid of that debt. What about the guys like me who went into the military, didn't go to college because you didn't want to incur that debt? See, my mother taught me something growing up. I have two parents. Both of them are World War II veterans, and not many people can say their mom is a World War II veteran. My mom was a nurse in North Africa, which predates the Normandy invasion. She was fighting the Nazis before Normandy. My mom, as well as my dad. And my mom taught me to be debt-free. She said, if you're in debt, you're a slave. And I've lived my life that way, being debt-free. So all these kids that went to college and incurred all this debt, they chose to incur it. Now, while granted, there's some bad things that have been done to them while incurring this debt, and I have sympathy for those things. The government should hold on to the debt, not sell it to these debt collectors and all this other crap that I've heard about. But I just want to be straightforward, Sabrina. Where there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of rich kids got out of serving the country in Vietnam because they could go to college and they could go get student loans and all this stuff. While us poor kids, we got trooped off to Vietnam. And thank God we had people like Muhammad Ali who stood up and said no. But unfortunately, Jesse Ventura volunteered, said yes, and joined the Navy because the Navy's never drafted. And then Jesse Ventura goes into the Brownwater Navy, the underwater demolition SEAL team, which is about the worst you can go into if you want action. But that's who I am. But then again, so, when you start talking, Jesse Ventura, about student debt and student loans and all that stuff, I got to be convinced I'm a hardliner on that, and you can't blame me because of my background and what I lived through personally, watching the rich kids get out of it while the poor kids bled and died.
Okay.
And when I got out of the service, I immediately joined the Stop the Draft movement to end the draft. I also drug my wife out of the house for the Equal Rights Amendment in Minnesota and made her go protest that too. So Jesse Ventura likes the First Amendment, and Jesse Ventura uses the First Amendment throughout his life.
So here it comes. I have to tell you that I was a former academic advisor in higher education. I went to state college. My dad was former military, so
Sure.
we didn't have a lot of money to like send me to college. My parents paid what they could pay, and the rest I took out in student loans. Here's the problem with my generation and the students that I advised. We were pretty much, preached to by our guidance counselors in high school that we had to go to college if we wanted to have like a decent living, if we wanted to make if we didn't want to end up, struggling financially.
Sure.
So we listened to that. Then what happened is that college over time has become incredibly expensive, including the state school. So I'm in Massachusetts. University of Massachusetts is charging people $30,000 a year for tuition. That's ridiculous for a public school. So what's happening is these kids are getting into the colleges and even the state schools, but they still have to take out the student loans. Then they graduate from college and we're getting jobs, but the jobs aren't paying us what we should make to adjust for inflation. And then at the same time, you still have the interest on the loans accumulating. For me, I can tell you my student loans is not so much how much I borrowed, it's the interest.
No, and I agree. Sabrina, I agree. They should do something to eliminate the interest. Get rid of at least that. No, Sabrina, I'm not deaf ears. You guys got sold a bill of goods. Certainly you did. The same as we were sold them back in the Vietnam era. Back then we were told the same thing. Back then it was you better go to college or you're going to Vietnam. That was what you were faced. So of course kids would try to get student, loans rather than go to Vietnam necessarily. Vietnam changed and did not become a popular war, most definitely, especially with the students. They were first and foremost that protested against the Vietnam War. So I know, and I have a sympathetic ear. You guys are getting raked over the coals and somebody needs to do something about it. But also I like to make the same people think. And I like to call them to task a little, saying, so always remember, too, where there's a will, there's a way. And there's ways to educate yourself and do it and not always go into debt. Because do you agree with me? Debt, my mom bought a new car every 4 years. You know how she did it? That's about when the warranty ended. And she would do it. She'd save up during that 4 years. And she'd trade in the old one, never took out a loan. She paid off. She saved up and paid off because in those days, they'd always say, well, how do you want to pay for this? And if you said cash at the end, they'd even lower the price more to get the cash. And my mom paid cash and bought a new car every 4 years. And all she was a nurse.
Yeah, my generation can't do that.
Right. But still, it shows don't go into debt. It shows how destructive debt can be. That's the point I'm making, Sabrina, for people to listen and pay attention to. Be afraid of debt because a debt is slavery. If you get caught up in debt, you can't be free because somebody owns you then. Somebody owns that debt. I sit here today, Sabrina, and my mom didn't harp this to me. I learned this watching her. My mom ran the money in my house, not my dad. My mom was the one that did it, not my dad. My dad didn't even drive. My mom drove. But there was a reason for that. I found out later, after my dad had passed, that he didn't drive because of post-traumatic stress of World War II. He was with the anti-tank unit. And so, needless to say, I found out he had to drive over so many dead bodies that he couldn't get behind the wheel of a car ever again. But that was never made known to me until after he was gone. I asked him one time, I said, Dad, because we grew up in the Beaver Cleaver era. And I said, Dad, how come your mom drives and you don't? All other families' dads drive. And my dad just looked at me and says, I don't trust myself. That was good enough for me. I thought, well, if you don't trust yourself, you shouldn't drive. Right? And then it was my mom after my dad passed away. I happened to bring it up the subject one day and she said, he didn't tell you. That wasn't the reason. And I said, well, what was the reason Dad didn't drive? And she said, well, that was post-traumatic stress from World War II driving the tank destroyers. Apparently over so many bodies out on the battlefield, it looked like cordwood. And so he could never get behind the wheel of a vehicle without apparently getting flashbacks or being very uncomfortable. By the way, and I can solve your student debt for you. You want Jesse Ventura to solve student debt? I can do it right now. You want it, Sabrina?
Yes. Go ahead.
To show you how presidential I am, I can give Sabrina the answer right now nationally to solve student debt. You ready?
I'm ready.
nationally legalize cannabis and marijuana, tax it a normal tax like you do alcohol, and take all the money from those taxes and apply it to the student debt loan, and it's gone. They're doing it in Colorado. Look at, she's speechless. Jesse Ventura just solved student debt for the first time on Sabrina's show. That's the first time I've uttered those words, Sabrina. I've never before spoken that before. Right now, that would solve student debt through the United States of America. Legalize cannabis, marijuana, put a normal tax on it like you do alcohol, take that taxed money and apply it to the student debt, and you all are off the hook.
I never thought about that. I mean, we legalized.
Sabrina, are you now going to support me for president?
Okay, so here's the thing.
Sabrina, I asked you a point blank question. Am I your man for president now?
I got to hear about health care.
I already told you. I'm for health care. I told you that. I believe in this rich country, no one who's sick should not be able to go to a doctor. That's exactly what you're asking for.
This is true. This is true.
Ta-da. Sabrina, am I your candidate for president or what? I just solved your student loan problem.
Are you running through the Forward Party?
Yeah, if it happens, it'll be with them.
I don't
they're
know.
I run with them because they're the ones that have the idea to win. The rest of these parties are not focused to winning.
But I think
you got to win to do something.
But I think the thing is like, oh, okay, so you got to understand, like, I'm what people would call a Marxist. So for me, when I looked at the Forward Party's platform, I was like, sounds corporate.
Sabrina, would we be better than what you got now?
A lot of things will be better than what we have now, though.
There you go. It has to come, Sabrina, in increments. You're a Marxist. Great. You're never going to turn the United States Marxist. Not in your lifetime, your kid's lifetime, or their kid's lifetime. Ain't going to happen. Be a realist. Make your point, score where you can, and allow the anti-Marxists to exist too.
Well, then what do you say about people like Shama Sawant? Like, she's Marxist, she's one socialist alternative. They're doing Shama Sawant.
I don't even know who she is. You got to remember, Jesse ain't on the internet.
Okay, Shama Sawant, she's a Marxist. She's a part of an organization called Socialist Alternative.
Okay.
She won, she's city councilor in Seattle, and they tried to recall her about last year. They tried multiple times to find ways to take her out, but the reason why she was able to win is because Socialist Alternative organized on the ground first.
Sure.
And they did the Fight for 15 in Seattle. So they organized the people and the workers first, and then the candidate came from the movement.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. I'm not against that. That's what democracy is. She won an election. Great. Now, can she control the agenda? I doubt it. She's just one person on that panel. I know because, see, Sabrina, I've been a mayor. I was mayor of the 6th largest city in Minnesota for 4 years, Brooklyn Park. So I know local politics. I know how that works too. I've been a mayor. I've been a governor. I know the executive branches at both levels very well because I served as both. And if she won, I have nothing against that. A Marxist wins an election at a local level, wonderful. If she won Congress, great. She's only one vote. We live in a democracy. You got to get enough votes to make it happen. And you ain't going to win enough votes with total Marxism. It ain't going to happen in America. Be a realist.
Well,
you can still accomplish things.
For me, Yang would have to, like, there could not be corporate money attached. That's a big one for me. And the other thing is, I saw Andrew Yang.
I've never taken corporate money. I can tell you that personally. I took no Do you know how much, Sabrina, I bet you don't even know this. Do you know how much money I raised to become governor of Minnesota?
How much?
300,000. Ooh, that opened your eyes a little. I like that. Your eyes got wider. Yeah, $300,000. And you know how I got that money? $50 donations, because Minnesota had a policy where people could give a $50 donation to the candidate of their choice and then write it off on taxes. It was a program they had. And you know what happened? The minute I won, the Dems and Repubs, when I left office, they took away that program so that no Jesse Ventura could ever rise up again. See, no,
Wow.
all the money I got, it was through a program the state of Minnesota had, where you could give $50 to a candidate, governor's candidate, and then you get a receipt, and you could use that receipt and take it deducted off your taxes as a campaign contribution. That's how I took all my money. I did not take one penny from corporations. I took no money from special interest. In fact, Sabrina, my first day in office, do you know what my first orders were to my staff? I told my staff, okay, everyone, I didn't meet with one lobbyist to get elected governor of Minnesota. They did nothing to help me. So please put the word out that Jesse Ventura, governor of 38th governor of Minnesota, does not meet with lobbyists. They can go find new jobs. And in my 4 years, I never met with a lobbyist. Sabrina, do you think I might? Gee, is he one of us?
It's not even
Let's question whether, gee, is Jesse Ventura one of us? Now, we may not agree. I'm also pro-choice.
That's true.
You know, come on. I'm not, again, and you know who made me pro-choice? My mother. You know why my mother made me pro-choice?
Why?
She was a nurse. I remember her coming home from work and telling me about the things they'd get in the emergency room because of the back alley abortions taking place back in the 50s and 60s. And I remember when Roe v. Wade came, and my mom as a nurse breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that they wouldn't have to face multiple lives dying because of something being illegal, because she made me understand, and it's carried with me with the war on drugs and everything of that nature. And that is this: just because you make something illegal doesn't mean it's going away.
That's true. That's true.
It just means now it's going to be run by criminals. So that's the true choice you make when you prohibit. Do you want this to be run by up in the open and fair, or do you want criminals to run it? Because it's not going to go away. Now abortion and that is going to be handled in all those states that ban it by quote unquote criminals, because they'll be breaking laws to do it. And that's going to bring an element that they shouldn't have to break laws to do that, you know, for women's health care. That's ridiculous, you know?
Right.
So it's absurd. And oh, you heard what I said. Did you follow me? I mean, I got to give a plug here on Substack. People need, you want more Jesse Ventura? Substack. Die First, Then Quit. That's the name of my show. And I wrote the greatest article because in Texas and all these places that are banning the woman's choice, right? That's okay if they want to follow the law all the way. And that's this. Then you have to hold the person who is ultimately responsible for an abortion responsible. And you know who that is? Men. Men need to be held responsible. This is Jesse Ventura telling you this. Men need to be responsible for abortions because without a man, there cannot be an abortion. So if you look at it complete legality, there cannot be an abortion without a man's participation, and the man is the aggressor because it is the man who enters the woman. So therefore, he is the aggressor. He needs to be held accountable. And if they're going to allow lawsuits, then The impregnated woman, her brother, her friend, or anybody else should be able to sue the man for pain and suffering and impregnating this woman. And what did he do to stop the pregnancy? Did he use a condom? Did he use everything available? And then I'll finish my tirade as soon as I'm done with another thing. So nothing is going to happen good until the law holds men responsible. And if this is taken to the full extent of the law, the men should be held responsible, because it's no different than robbing the bank. If you're the guy at home who plans the bank robbery and the people go rob the bank, you're just as guilty. Is Donald Trump listening on January 6th on that? If you plan the bank robbery and other people rob the bank, you're still just as guilty, Donald Trump, January 6th. You're following what I'm saying there, right? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I have to say,
but what I'm getting to is Sabrina, nothing on women's rights is going to happen until you hold men responsible for abortions, which they should be held responsible. Now, here's my final thing for all you women. You women hold the key to our country. If you don't want this ultra-right takeover to happen, stop it, because it's in your hands. You're the ones. I said this 4 years ago. I told women, you're the ones. You're the ones that have to stop it. You got to step forward and stop it. And you got to do whatever it takes to stop it. And, in this whole, and as far as the freedom of choice, men must be held accountable. And here's my thing to you women, okay? If I were a woman today, I'd be very reluctant to have sex with a man. With the gone of Roe v. Wade, and all the onus is put on you to make sure you're not getting pregnant, and nothing is on the man. He's not held responsible if he impregnates you, is he? No. He's not responsible for, they got these laws where the woman has to bring up the rapist's child.
Well, Jesse,
when are we going to get the men? Until you get the men, Sabrina, nothing going to change. You got to get them. And the only person that can get the men are the women. I can't do it. You all start withholding. Don't have sex with them. Drive them nuts. All single women out there, don't go out and get picked up, and stop it. Let these guys get so damn horny in a month, they'll give in to anything. Sabrina, then you got them.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Jesse, I just
Here we are on Sabrina's sex. What are we going to call this show now? Sabrina's sexual advice. Here we go.
Oh, no.
But I'm serious on that. Women can hold their own destiny in their hands on this one. Give me the answer. Am I not right? What message to tell single women out there? You got no protection from the government now. You lost your rights. Well, then what right does he have? Where's his right? Why is his right okay? This is a chance to get, Sabrina, this is a chance to get back at him. How long was it before they let you vote? Hey, you need to understand, you're talking to a Navy SEAL. Do you know what one of our things is in the Navy SEALs, Sabrina? You know what one of our mottos is? We don't get mad, we get even. Die first, then quit.
Oh, boy.
See, I can give you the macho of a Navy SEAL all day long because I did it. I lived it. I know what it's like to be the ultimate macho male, because the SEALs go beyond pro sports or anything like that. You want to know why? Because unfortunately, the end result, sometimes you can't come back and play again.
Mm.
That's the difference.
Mm. Well, Jesse,
well, when you do an op, Sabrina, different than a pro football game. Pro football game, you play this game and you're probably going to play a week later. You do an op at wartime with SEAL team, there's a good chance you could leave and not ever play again. And that you have to become as comfortable with as you possibly can be when you do that. That's why that life is so intense. 4 years of it was enough for me. I served 6 active, 2 years of reserve, but 4 years of that active duty in that unit gave me enough excitement for a lifetime.
That's awesome. I have to say, listen, first and foremost, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Next
you're
time
still,
you talk, Sabrina,
you're not telling me, am I your candidate? Come on. I mean, I've more than, I mean.
This is how I was trying to get out of this.
I should be your guy on Mount Rushmore.
It's the Andrew Yang thing. It's the Andrew Yang.
Somebody's got to get you there. How are you going to get ballot access? If you ain't got ballot access, excuse my bluntness, you ain't doing shit. You've got to, and they have the opportunity to get ballot access. You got to, you can sit out here, Sabrina, and do all this you want of giving alternatives, complaining, showing right from wrong. But until you get in the game and win, you can't change nothing.
Yeah. But why not take over a party that's already, why not take over the Green Party?
They're a mess. Who's going to put them? They're already fractured. They're in 5 different. I tried 4 years ago. I'm not a dummy. Fool me. I live by a simple thing, Sabrina. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I got the shame on you all once with the Green Party. I made myself available in 2020. And they dropped the ball. Even after polling 18% on Fox. And put it this way, Sabrina, do you know what I was polling at the start of the debates in Minnesota? Now, the election's 6 weeks away. Do you know what my poll numbers were when the debates started between me and the two Democrat and Republican? I was polling 10%. After the first debate, you know what started happening? The Democrats and Republicans started canceling debates immediately. But they had 2 more scheduled they couldn't get out of.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
And they were defeated. Now, bear in mind, and I'll let you finish then the show, bear in mind, Minnesota has an advantage for third-party candidates, and you know what that is? We have same-day registration. So people can go down, register, and then vote the same day. And we have no voter fraud whatsoever in the state of Minnesota. I know, because after I won, we did a major study on it and found out there was no voter fraud. You may have election fraud by people running for election, but there is no voter fraud. That's bullshit. Anyway, Sabrina, say your goodbyes. I just thought I'll give you the last double barrel before I go.
Thank you so much for joining, Jesse. And
you're welcome, Sabrina. It's my pleasure. Where
can people find you, like on social media?
They can. I don't do social media. My son is doing it if it's being done. Like I said, I'm computer illiterate and I've never owned a cell phone, but I am on Substack every week. They can get my opinions and everything I do on Substack, and the show is called Die First, Then Quit. That's where they can find me, Substack. I lost my job at RT. Because of I've lost 2 jobs now because I lost my job at MSNBC because of the Iraq War.
Yep.
I was opposed to that war, and they wouldn't put me on the air because of my opposition to the invasion of Iraq. And so wars cost me jobs, Sabrina. So anyway, they can find me at Substack. Anything they want to do will be there. You'll get Jesse Ventura's opinion, and I know Sabrina's unwilling, but I'm her candidate. She just don't want to admit it. Bye, Sabrina.
Bye, Jesse. All right, guys. I'm going to get to some of these comments here, and then I'll get into, I have 2 news stories for you guys tonight. Let's see, go up here to the start here. Shout out to JB, my RBN comrade. Good morning to all, and a special hello. Good morning, JB. It's JB. Where are you? It's nighttime. Good morning to all, and a special hello to Mr. Ventura. Sabs just saw a post from a follower that was inspired to do more direct action in the UK. See what you and RBN are inspiring. I'm proud of you. Oh, thanks. Shout out. Notary says, I'm experiencing a weird feeling. I think it's optimism. Jesse rocks. Thank you so much for the super chat, Buster Peak 21. It's okay to push back. Is that Tulsi in your? That is Tulsi picture. Bart says Yang's policies may not be as good as the Green Party, but his organizational skills and motivation are far great. Maybe the Green Party could learn something instead of whining about it. Ouch. Greg Bruce says, Cholahu 2024, why vote for lesser evil? Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Colorado can do it because they don't have sovereign currency. Jess, you can do it as simply by having your Treasury Secretary mint a platinum coin to target debts. Thank you so much for that, Roger Meadows. Thank you for the super chat. Give them the boot. Reparations / defund the police. Good question. Sorry, guys. I usually see these after. Usually when I'm interviewing someone, I like to pay attention to the guest. And thank you for this super chat, William. Way to hold your ground in crazy old man's land. Thank you for the super chat, William. I never thought I'd talk about we be having a sex conversation on here with Jesse Ventura. Oh man. Bad Cookie said it's pronounced Cthulhu. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right. Let's go ahead and get into, we got 2 news stories I want to talk about tonight. The first one is in reference to Jon Stewart and the Veterans Bill. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this yet, but there was a bill in reference to veterans health care, and it did not pass in the Senate. And after it didn't pass, there were a couple of GOP senators fist bumping each other. They were proud and excited that it did not pass. Now, Jon Stewart had a lot to say about this. He's been getting a lot of attention politically lately. And I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB for this clip here. Listen to what Jon Stewart has to say about the Veterans Bill. Outrage after Burn Pitt's vote fails. Veterans are going to die. I'm going to chime in here and there because there are some things I got to say about this in reference to veterans healthcare and healthcare for everyone in general.
Advocates were just escorted by the Capitol Police out of a Senate building. What's your response to that?
It's dangerous to have to explain to people's faces why you're denying them health care and benefits. So if anybody should have been escorted out of the building, it should have been the senators that chose to stab these veterans in the back. So I have no sympathy for them being asked to explain their really, I mean, honestly, Jake, like, I don't know what to say. You know, I've been coming down here for years. I've never seen anything like this. And it's not, as I was saying in the press conference, I'm used to lies. I'm used to hypocrisy. I'm used to their cowardice. I'm not used to the cruelty, like the casual cruelty of passing a bill that they had fought for more than a decade. And look, there are Vietnam veterans on this bill. They've been fighting since the 60s and 70s, people that fought for us, that we all say we support the troops.
Let's talk about this for just a second when Jon Stewart says that he's not used to the cruelty. That's because Jon Stewart is rich. This is because Jon Stewart is a celebrity. Some of us know differently. Some of us are used to this type of cruelty. Think about all the bills, all the legislation didn't pass. Jon Stewart said he's not used to the cruelty. Just last year, was that or the beginning of this year? I think it was last year. I forget. So many bills have failed. But since it was just last year, I believe, was when they voted on a $15 minimum wage, right? That didn't pass in the Senate. Kyrsten Sinema did a little curtsy, thumbs down, a little twirl with it. That was cruelty. But Jon Stewart says he's not used to this type of cruelty. People fighting for these things. People have been fighting for $15 minimum wage for years. He's not used to it because he's not affected. So this is something I want to point out. There's been multiple bills that have not passed that show whether it's been cruelty from Democrats or Republicans. I believe the reason why Jon Stewart is speaking out is not just because it affects veterans, because I know he does care a lot about the troops, but it also, I think he's speaking out about this because it's something that the GOP voted against, not so much the Democrats. See, this is my problem with a lot of these celebrities. They come forward when it's the GOP that messes up. But a lot of times when the Democrats mess up, they're silent or they make excuses for them. So where was Jon Stewart when they wouldn't pass $15 minimum wage? We want to talk about health care for veterans. What about health care for everybody? Where was Jon Stewart's anger and resentment about the fact that we don't have health care for everybody in this country, period? Why is he only upset when it affects veterans? This is something I want you to think about. Let's go back into the video and I'll chime in between, because this is something that I've noticed about him and about some of these other celebrities. They come forward when it's convenient for them. Here we go.
Pass that bill for them to give them that moment of exhale. By the way, their trial isn't over. That just means that maybe they'll get their health care, maybe their family get the benefits, maybe they won't have to decide between their chemo and their car.
Right, they still might die.
Well, a lot of them, unfortunately, when you have cancer, a lot of these guys tell me, they live scan to scan. So they live in 3-month increments, right? And these guys are all,
But Jon Stewart, that's everybody though. That's everyone, whether you're a veteran or not. Everyone that has had to go through cancer lives through those scans as well. I know I've had family members that have had it. They've had to do the same thing. See, this is the problem. Like, why is it only an issue when it affects veterans? They're not the only ones dealing with this. So we should only really care and only be like advocates for it when it affects veterans. What about everybody else? What about when it affects poor people, working class people? He's talking about this as if, how dare they let this happen to veterans? No, Jon Stewart, how dare they let this happen to Americans, period. Everyone. It shouldn't matter what your profession is. No American should have to go without health care in this country. No one. No one. Notice at the bottom, it says advocate for veterans affected by burn pits. And I'm not saying he can't be an advocate for that. But if you want to advocate for healthcare issues, bring it on home to everybody, not just the veterans.
Don't worry. This is just procedural. It's a protest against an amendment. It's mandatory versus discretionary. It's all these nonsensical reasons to delay and deny when they passed the exact same bill on June 16th. Nothing's changed.
So Pat Toomey, the Republican from Pennsylvania, he says he doesn't have, it's his amendment.
You should say Patriot Pat Toomey. He prefers Patriot Pat Toomey. That's his given moniker.
His amendment is the one that we're talking about. This is all held up over.
That's correct.
He says his amendment addresses how this $400 billion in the bill can be spent. He says, as it's written, the money can be used for things unrelated to veterans.
That's nonsense.
And burn pit exposure.
It's just utter nonsense. The Secretary of the VA has to go every year, even though it goes into a mandatory spending tranche where it comes to that. The VA Secretary still has to go in every year and explain the appropriation and the use. And the spending of the money is related to the bill. It's not a slush fund.
Right.
But if you want to talk about slush funds, if Senator Toomey wants to explain his fiscal conservatism, then why is it that he voted, every year we vote for what's called the OCO. It's a $60 billion, $70 billion fund that goes on top of the $600 billion or $700 billion or $800 billion that the Pentagon already gets. And it is unaccountable. There are no guardrails. It truly can be spent on pretty much whatever they decide they want to spend it on. Toomey's never raised a peep about it. He's never raised his hand. He's never objected. He's never held up the NDAA because of it.
The defense bill, you're saying, the NDAA.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund is a literal definition of a slush fund. And all of these individuals that voted to deny the veterans the health care and benefits that they've been fighting for 15 years voted for this slush fund. So
I just want to point this out again. And it's not as though I'm, against this. It's not as though I'm okay that this did not pass. But the point that I want to drive home is this shouldn't have even been. I'm thinking about what I heard over the weekend when I was at Grant Manor here in Boston about how if you cross the street in Mass Ave over to the south end, between Roxbury and the south end, if you cross the street from Roxbury over to the south end, your life expectancy goes up 30 years. Because over there in the housing projects in places like Grant Manor, because the buildings are not structurally sound, because there's not proper ventilation, the kids, and because there's mold, the kids are inhaling chemicals and mold, and they develop other illnesses such as asthma, and they become asthmatic. Where is that same type of frustration and fight for poor people, for Black people who are suffering from the same damn thing? This is the problem that I have with it. Again, not saying Jon Stewart shouldn't be an advocate, but how is it just for one group of people? The federal government, do I think that they should have done their due diligence when it comes to veterans in this country? Absolutely. But I also think the federal government needs to do their due diligence when it comes to healthcare for everyone in this country. My parents were military. I know what military health insurance is like. TRICARE pays for almost everything. Almost everything. And I feel that if you could have that type of insurance by being in the military, why shouldn't that type of insurance be offered to everybody that's in this country, not just those who choose to go fight abroad? So this is the problem that I have. This is the problem. Where's the celebrity that's advocating for the poor Black and brown people who are getting these illnesses because of the housing units that they live in, the only ones they can afford to live in, that the city and the state and the federal government are allowing to poison those communities? Where's that celebrity to fight for that, for the health care for those people? Let's go back in.
Lying. A, you can't just spend this money on whatever you want to. And B, when there have been billions of dollars in expendable money that they can spend whatever they want to, they vote for it. Well, so this is nonsense.
The Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, who's one of the co-sponsors of the bill in the House, when I asked her about this, she said I'm paraphrasing. It's odd how nobody has any objection on how much money we spend on going to war. But when it comes to taking care of the people who wage these wars.
Trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
But, you know, Rick Scott, senator from Florida, had a great tweet today. Glad to be here at the VSO to pack care packages for those and honor their service for how much they give to us. And then an hour later went on the floor and denied those veterans health care and benefits. Like, the hypocrisy is so galling, but then you get to a place where I'm at right now, which is, how do you shame the shameless? What will get through to them? The stories that you heard are heartbreaking. A gentleman today told me of someone who committed suicide. Rosie's husband attempted.
They don't care about the stories. Those politicians do not care about these sob stories that people have about the way that their families have been, you know, basically medically bankrupt, how people have died. They don't care. They serve corporate interest. And I would think that someone like Jon Stewart would know that. And maybe he does know that. And if he does know that, then why isn't he saying that? Why isn't he calling out the fact that, listen, these politicians are voting against helping the American people because they're actually helping their donors and corporate interests instead? That's something that needs to be said. That's something that needs to be called out. That they don't care. Listen, I've seen these speeches multiple times over and over again. I've watched people pour their hearts out on the Senate floor. These politicians do not care. Look at the way Lindsey Graham spoke to Chris Smalls when Chris Smalls was talking about uniting the workers and not making it a left-right issue. They don't care about us. They care about pockets. They care about their money. That's all they care about. And I find it hard to believe that Jon Stewart doesn't understand why this is happening, or how they could not have that compassion, or how they could not care. I find that hard to believe.
To take his own life based on his desperation with this system and this process of being denied care. And these guys, they act like, oh, don't worry. You know, maybe we'll get to it now. Maybe we'll get to it in the lame duck session. Some of these folks won't be around. They live scan to scan. So they can pretend to be on Senate time, but these other folks are on human time.
Yeah, they don't care, John. They don't care. And it's not just those veterans. Again, for those just joining, it's not just those veterans that are living scan to scan. Everyone I know that has had cancer has had to go through this. And I know people that have had it that don't have any health insurance at all. And I've known people that had health insurance and they were still getting $1,600 bills with insurance. I really do feel like this is all a game. It's all a game. I still question the fact that after all these years and after all these decades of doing cancer research, that they still can't find a cure for cancer. I believe that they can. But there's no money in the cure per se. There's more money in treatment. When people are paying $1,600 every time they have to have chemotherapy and they have health insurance, the money is in the treatment. This is what we really need to be thinking about.
And that time is precious. You know, Senate time, these guys all live to be 200 years old. They never lose their jobs. They always get their health care. Like, nothing matters to them. Nothing penetrates that bubble that they live in of procedural bullshit.
It's not a bubble of procedural bullshit. It's a bubble of money. It's a bubble of corporate interest. They don't answer to us. They're supposed to, but they don't. That's what it's about. And now there's a lot of talk about the veterans, but I don't hear a lot of talk about the innocent people that they went over there to kill. What about those lives? What about those families? But no, then you can't talk about that. Because if you talk about that, you won't be back. You will not be invited back on CNN again. Very interesting. Now, he had a speech. I actually don't think did I connect that one? No, I don't think I connected that one. Okay, maybe I did just go with this one. I think I did just go with this one. Okay, sorry. A little bit more of this, and then we'll go on.
You were able to, you and all the 9/11 first responders were able to shame Congress into helping with those benefits. You were able to do that. Your testimony and the testimony of others with you, some of whom are no longer with us, had an effect. You don't think you can this time?
It did. This passed.
Right.
We passed the House. The PACT Act passed the House.
And it passed the Senate.
And then it passed the Senate, 84-14.
Yep.
A wipeout. And there was a technical error, one sentence. So I want people to understand, like, the PACT Act, with the mandatory spending provision that Toomey is objecting to, passed with overwhelming Republican support. Toomey hasn't supported it at all because I think robots can't feel. So that may be why he hasn't supported it, because he's not a real boy and can't feel real boy feelings. But this all passed. There was one provision in it that was snuck in by the VA, not snuck in, but put in, that wanted to let rural medical practices be sold to the VA so that veterans who lived far distances from the system could still get VA quality toxic exposure care, right? Just one sentence. Got flagged as a blue slip issue because they felt that was a revenue generating provision, and that has to start in the House, because God knows, why shouldn't we just live all our lives by Robert's Rules of Order?
Right.
So
it went back to the House.
So it went back to the House. First of all, the Senate tried to go down in that moment on June 16th and say, hey man, a little bit of a screw up. Can we just get unanimous consent to remove that sentence? Senator Pat Toomey, no, we can't. 300 House Republicans passed it, 84 senators passed it, and one guy can go, yeah, no, they don't get health care, and they don't.
And that's how it works. What he just said there, one guy can go, yeah, they don't get health care. That's how it works. That's their rotating villain. And it's unfortunate that the system is that way, but that's how it is. All it can take is just that one person to say no. That's how the system works. So, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that this has happened. But I will say this one thing about the veterans, because there's a lot of people, you know, living in the South. There's a lot of troops, a lot of military bases down South. And one of the things that I used to hear a lot from people who are conservative is they used to say, we have to stand up for our troops. I support the troops. All about the troops, troops, troops. And as I got older, I started to see that they don't really care that much about those troops. When I would go down to the VA, I would realize Veteran Affairs don't really care about these troops. The community don't really care about those troops when they come back from these wars and they need help and they're injured or they're suffering from PTSD. They don't really care about these troops. To the people who say those things, why don't we care about these troops, or we need to care about them more? Or they say, believe in America. You know, that whole America rah, rah crowd. One thing I would say to them is, if you care so much about these troops, why not go down to the VA and volunteer some of your time to help out these troops that you claim to care so much about? To the politicians who like to make those same phrases, we have to support our troops. They always say that when it's time for us to go to war. You don't really hear them say that when they come back from war, though. To those politicians who use that same phrase, we have to look out for our troops. We have to support our troops when all that war is involved. To those politicians, I say, if you care so much about those troops, then why don't you pass legislation that will protect and help those troops when they get back from war, if you care about them so much? Because they don't care about them. I've had to deal with the VA for years, not for myself personally, but for my family for years. And I can tell you, they do not care. All they want you to do is go over there and fight their wars. When you come back here, they do not care about your broken, crippled, traumatized self. They use you and then they leave you alone. And I can tell you a lot of the homeless people that I've encountered, a lot of times they're vets. The government picks them up and discards them when they're done with them. It's unfortunate, but this is the country that we live in. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Oh, Nick was in the chat. Socialist MMA, what did I miss? Oh, Nick, you missed a lot. Who's going to tell him? Leroy, oh man, Socialist MMA. I'm in the car and yelled what to something Jesse said, and I definitely scared my son. JB says the government is taking away benefits from veterans and putting them in the same space as the rest of us. They want us to perish all the same, veterans included. I agree. She's Black says, is he also protesting Dems? Someone informed John that Dems control the House and the Senate. Someone also tell him that we have a Democratic president. And that's my point with him, is that he doesn't, it's only when it's the other side. Send the text. Why can't Jon Stewart have outrage over no Medicare for all? Exactly. Where's that same, it just, oh my God. Boy, I tell you. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you so much for the tip, Roger. Sabby, you switched up on me. Anyway, saying we are better than what we got now is a low bar. People support ballot initiatives. This top-down over dependency on a top-down strategy using your queen to clear the board is not where it's at, guys. Use your rooks, ballot initiatives, and VRs, bishops, state government, knights, big cities, pawns, suburban government. Bottom-up strategy to get it done. Roger, I do not know how to play chess, but I get what you're saying. Thank you for this tip as well. If you don't live in a ballot initiative state, get your state to provide a pathway that will allow worker co-ops to grow and proliferate in your state and build from there. Sheesh. I came on at 7 p.m. Thanks, Sabrina. By the way, coming an hour late, and I felt like I was on a damn roller coaster ride. Holy shit, dude, begging for votes hard. Aw, thank you for that, Roger. Quickly, I want to give a shout out to patrons, and I'll go into our last story because I do want to make sure that I give a shout out to you guys. All right. Thank you guys so much for becoming Sabby patrons. If you're interested, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and they're also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. I think I'm going to make those, when I get around to it, I have a busy week, but when I get around to it, I think I'm going to make the names a little bit larger on this sheet. I need to figure out another, I don't know. I want to do something different for that, basically, to make the names a little bit larger on there. Let me just scoot this up a little bit. So our final story, if you have not heard, unfortunately, Bill Russell passed away yesterday. And for those who are not aware, Bill Russell, he was more than a basketball legend. Now, yesterday, I did a very quick, very, very quick video to tell you that he did pass away and that I would do a tribute to him tonight on tonight's show. And there's one thing I want to say about that before I show you the things that I'm going to show you. I think when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to talk about this tonight, I didn't want to just focus on his career as a Celtics player, because he did a lot more than that. He was an activist as well. But I will also say, I think that if you're going to talk about Bill Russell and his time with the Celtics, for me, I can't talk about that without also talking about the fact that Bill Russell was not welcomed here in Boston when he played for that team. Now, some of you may know about this and some of you may not. But if I'm going to talk about it, we got to talk about the whole thing. We can't just talk about how great he was as a Celtic player. We need to talk about how he was treated when he lived here. So I first want to start with this video clip to give you an idea of some of the things that Bill Russell did. Then I'm going to go to an article that I have, and then another clip that I want to show you as well.
Of the sports icon.
Can you do the volume booster really quick, Eric? And then let's scoot this back a little bit because I don't want to. Thanks.
Sports world is mourning the loss of an NBA giant. Boston Celtics legend and civil rights activist Bill Russell has died. His family announced the news on social media, calling Russell the most prolific winner in American sports history. NBC's George Solis has a look back at the life and legacy of the sports icon.
There's a difference between being proud and having pride.
It wasn't just because of his height that Bill Russell towered over everyone else. He was a force to be reckoned with, both on
The only really important thing was try to win every game.
and off the court.
You know, I was here when Martin Luther King made that speech.
Decades after retiring, he still dominates the record books with more championships than any other player in any sport. 2 NCAA championships, 1 gold medal, and an astonishing 11 NBA titles in 13 years with the Boston Celtics.
Kuzi in the lane. Russell, dunk.
Winning the last 2 as the team's coach. The first black coach in any major U.S. sport. He used his stature as one of the first black superstar athletes to fight for change. In 1961, boycotting a game after he and his black teammates were denied service at a restaurant. He also participated in the March on Washington in 1963. In the audience as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech.
For us that were deeply involved, the changes were very slow.
Moments highlighted by President Barack Obama in 2011 before awarding Russell the Presidential
Boo for Obama, but anyway.
Medal of Freedom.
And I hope that one day in the streets of Boston, children will look up at a statue built not only to Bill Russell the player, but Bill Russell the man.
2 years later, that would become a reality.
So I remember when they put that statue up here. I still remember that.
NBA Commissioner Adam Silver called Russell the greatest champion in all of team sports. Magic Johnson saying he is heartbroken over the passing of the greatest winner the game of basketball has ever seen and friend and mentor of the last 30 years. His family said he passed away peacefully, his wife at his side. Bill Russell was 88 years old.
Okay. So that's a little bit about him. But I also want to talk about something else. First and foremost, let's look at those 11 championships that Bill Russell won. That's right, 11 championships with the Boston Celtics. You don't see this happen today. Now, granted, there weren't as many NBA teams back then as there are now, but I would argue, even if there were, Bill Russell would probably still have 11 championships. He was one of the few people that could actually give Wilt Chamberlain a run for the money. One of the few. Let's look at these championships with the Boston Celtics. He won in 1957, 1959, 1960, 1961, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 68, and 69. That's a lot. You also have to know that Bill Russell, like I said, we need to talk about the fact that he was not welcomed here in Boston. And although a lot of people were really excited when that statue went up and they're like, yay, Bill Russell. But I don't think we should forget what happened to Bill Russell when he lived here. In 1966, Bill Russell becomes NBA's first black head coach. The NBA's first black head coach. Now, some of you will say, oh, that's identity politics. I'm going somewhere with this, and this is important for you to know. Number one, you have to consider the time period. Bill Russell had 9 rings as a player when Red Auerbach elected to retire ahead of 1966 to the 1967 season after consulting with several former Celtics about taking on his coaching post. Auerbach settled on making Russell the first black head coach in NBA history. At the time of his hire, Russell was famously quoted as saying, "I wasn't offered the job because I am a Negro. I was offered it because Red figured I could do it." And this is very important, and I'll go on in here in just a second. Even when Bill Russell was brought to the Celtics, Red Auerbach did not pick him because he was black. Red Auerbach picked him because he really was the best of the best. So this is important for people to understand. Now, 1968, Bill Russell becomes the first black head coach to win the NBA title. There's him with the Celtics there. After a playoff elimination at the hands of the 68 win from the 76ers in the 1967 playoffs, Russell's Celtics returned to glory in 1968 with their win over the LA Lakers. I don't know why this is moving on its own. That's weird. Russell became the first black head coach to win an NBA title. Even more impressive, Russell did it as a player/coach, a role he held for his final 3 seasons in Boston. So he was a player and he was a coach at that point. Here's the part that some people don't like to talk about. When I talk about how he was treated when he was here in Boston. 1960s, burglars robbed Bill Russell's Reading home. By the way, it's pronounced Reading, even though the spelling is reading, it's pronounced Reading here in Massachusetts, leaving racial epithets in their wake. Of course, Russell's time with the Celtics wasn't all rings and roses. He dealt with quite a lot of racism from the Boston area community, including in his hometown of Reading. After Russell's family returned from a vacation over a long weekend, they found that their house had been broken into and vandalized. Racial epithets had been spray painted on the walls. Russell's trophies had all been smashed. The burglars had even defecated in the bed. It wasn't the only time the Russell family was subject to this behavior in Reading. As Russell's daughter Karen relayed in a 1987 editorial, every time the Celtics went on the road, vandals would come and tip over our garbage cans. My father went to the police station to complain. The police told him that raccoons were responsible. So he asked where he could apply for a gun permit. The raccoons never came back. Now, he's not the first and he's not the last athlete here in Boston to have to deal with this type of racial tension, racial remarks. And I will say this as well. Let me come out of here for a second. I couldn't imagine what it was like during that time. I couldn't imagine what it was like during that time living here in a city, playing in a city that was very much segregated. There's still some of that segregation going on now, but at that time, especially so. And here you are the star athlete of the Boston Celtics. And the Boston fans are booing you, not because you're losing, but because you're black. This is something that Bill Russell had to deal with while he played for the Celtics multiple times. How would you feel going out there to play for an audience every time and all of them are booing you and calling you the N-word and calling you a coon. Again, not because you're losing, because they were winning, but simply because you're black. Wilt Chamberlain had to deal with that. You saw the video about his civil rights, how he was involved in the civil rights protests, how he was involved with the March on Washington. He wasn't just a basketball player. But I like to point this out because I think we need to be very real here and honest. And for those of us who live in the Boston area, we need to be real about this. He was never welcomed here. No matter how many times he won, no matter how many championships he won, he was never welcomed. So we need to mention that. Now, something else that I want to show you as well. They talked about this on Undisputed. And I want you to listen to the way that Shannon Sharpe talked about this. Again, and I'm not going to play the whole thing here, but I do want to add this part as well. Another cool thing about Bill Russell is he was against the war in Vietnam. He was against it. Now, I want to highlight this portion here because I think this is important for people to see. Go down to this part here. There's one paragraph that I want to highlight. Uh-oh, I skipped something here. It is... Okay. Right about, I thought I wrote this down somewhere. Hold on. Yeah, I did write this down. Excuse me. Doobie-doobie-doo. Oh, yeah. Racial abuse and controversy with Celtics fans. Let me go back up to the top. That's the only thing about these things. You have to go all the way back up. Okay, here we go. Do-do-do-do-do. Boop. This paragraph right here, I want to highlight. Down here. Listen to this part. This is pretty important here. So this part here, I'm just going to highlight it because it's easier for you guys to see it that way. Whee! Listen to this. The already hostile atmosphere between Russell and Boston hit its apex when vandals broke into his house in Reading, Massachusetts. I told you guys about that part right here. In response, Russell described Boston as a flea market of racism. He was quoted as saying, "From my very first year, I thought of myself as playing for the Celtics, not for Boston. The fans can do or think whatever they wanted," referring to a time when the Celtics did not frequently sell out the Boston Garden, while the generally mediocre and all-white NHL Boston Bruins did. Russell recalled, "We, the Celtics, did a survey about what we could do to improve attendance. Over 50% of responses said there's too many black players." So this was at the point where they added more black players on the team. And that was the survey response from the fans. The reason why their attendance, they were not selling out, is because their fans thought there were too many black players. I wonder what they think about the NBA today. It goes on to say, in retirement, Russell described the Boston press as corrupt and racist. In response, Boston sports journalist Larry Claflin claimed that Russell himself was the real racist. Listen to this part. The FBI maintained a file on Russell and described him in their file as an arrogant Negro who wouldn't sign autographs for white children. I kid you not. The FBI did that. These are just some of the things that Bill Russell had to deal with while he played here. And so while some people, want to say RIP Bill Russell now in Boston, a lot of people, I want you to keep in mind that some of those same racist people that were around back then are still around today. So this has been a persistent problem that we've had in sports in Boston. And it hasn't just been Bill Russell. Other players that have come here to play have had to deal with this as well, even today. But I wanted you to see who Bill Russell really was, that he wasn't just a basketball player, and that even though he won 11 championship titles, he did so during all of this. He won all those championship titles while dealing with all of that. So rest in peace to Bill Russell. There's one more piece here, a little bit of tidbit of information that I need to add that you may not know as well. Later on, Bill Russell moved to Seattle to coach the Seattle Supersonics. That was back when Seattle had a basketball team. Yeah, believe it or not, at one point, Seattle had a professional basketball team. Do you know what he found? And this was coming from his daughter, by the way. There's an editorial from his daughter. Bill Russell found that even when he moved to Seattle, he had to deal with the same racist people that he had to deal with here in Boston. That once again, he found himself still celebrity, professional athlete per se, even though he's a coach at that point, very well known, but he was still discriminated against. So he went from one racist enclave to another. I hope for anyone who's discussed him today or yesterday, I hope they mention that part. But rest in peace, Bill Russell. Again, definitely, he was a basketball legend. I'm going to get to these comments and I'm going to roll out for you guys. Thank you so much for the super chat, VFX by Art. Little disappointed that the governor fell for Elon Mars BS. Elon has not gone to Mars and back yet. He hasn't even delivered on autopilot yet. Interesting. I don't even pay attention to Elon Musk that much anymore, to be honest. Jay said, my dad was a black man who barrel raced horses. We were never welcome at the all-white horse shows. What they really feared was getting beat by a black man. It's fascinating. That's interesting, Jay. If there's any other comments on Rockfin, Eric, I'll take those too. All right. Thank you for the tips on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. See, Zoomers, how they do you if you enlist. See that? Military recruitment is so low, they even accepting people they would have previously accepted before. Where due to the processed corporate food industry putting our kids in such bad health with no access to nutritious food and guaranteed health care growing up has shown you the karma our government has is eating its tail. Start public banks to build surplus to pay for needs. And thank you for this tip as well. Growing up in the 80s in New York as a teen, Sabrina, I always told Boston was one of the most racist cities in America. But yes, as Russ, Ali, Brown, Kareem, John Carlos got together to take a stand that OJ was invited to join, his attitude was, nah, whites love me. Me associating with y'all could hurt my brand with them. Now look at how whites see Ali and OJ in the twilight of their lives. Karmic. Interesting. Good points, Roger. All right, guys. I am heading out. Do have a busy week this week. You already saw Jesse Ventura was here. I interviewed Cynthia McKinney this morning. That was a recorded video because that was done at like 8 o'clock this morning. So that will post tomorrow afternoon. John Stasovich will be here tomorrow night. He's running as an independent for president. And also Kim Iverson will also be here this week as well. So busy week. Get pumped up, get some popcorn, put your feet back, and have some fun. All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.